One evening, Leela was left home alone. Her parents went to visit their friends, and she wanted to spend that evening drawing. Zoe, her friend, offered to spend time together watching scary movies because Halloween was coming up. But Zoe couldn't come because she had to babysit her little brother, and the girls decided that Leela would come to Zoe herself. Leela looked out the window and thought, "Wow, it's so dark tonight. I should take a flashlight." She found a flashlight in her father's pantry and went outside. The road the girl was walking on was lit by lanterns, and Leela was not afraid. But Zoe's house was behind the park, and walking through it was creepy in the dark. Having reached the entrance of the park, Leela stopped. The park was very dark. It was much darker than on the road and made her feel bad. The park smelled of dampness, cold, and fear. The girl got all shivery and thought, "It's probably better to go around the park, but this way will be 3 times longer. It's not far to go through the park." Leela lingered for a while and stepped into the park alley. "And it's not scary at all," thought the girl, and decided to go quickly all the way without stopping. She was going deeper into the park, and it was getting darker and darker. The air was getting thicker. The streetlights were far behind, and there was no light at all. The girl looked around. She couldn't see anything at all. And thereupon, she suddenly remembered about the flashlight. She turned on the light, but the darkness around her became even stronger. The flashlight lit only a narrow strip in front of her, and everything around became even blacker than it was. Light was shining in front of her, and she walked gently on, and there was nothing around her, only a narrow strip of light ahead. Suddenly, she felt someone coming behind her. Leela stepped up her pace and thought, "This is just the wind playing fallen leaves. Oh, just like in the song." Leela relaxed at the thought of thinking in lyrics. She stopped and listened. Turning abruptly, she flashed her flashlight back. A beam of light loosely illuminated the space. Leela saw only the clouds of mist in front of her. She felt bad, so she decided to run through the park without listening and stopping. The girl started running. Her feet were quickly stepping on the winding park alley, and Leela was looking just ahead. The darkness seemed to be running beside Leela, and she could catch a glimpse of the shadows that was emerging in front of her, on the sides and behind her. The shadows were running, and it looked as if they were about to grab her hand or leg, and all of a sudden, Leela heard a loud growl and then a terrible music. The girl stopped abruptly and screamed. The flashlight fell down and stopped shining. Leela was standing, her eyes closed with her hands. Her breath was shaken, her legs were aching. Suddenly, Leela heard again a deep growl behind. Leela felt the vibrations move through all her body and a cold running from head to toe. Leela feared to move and open her eyes. She seemed to stand for a few minutes, closing her eyes and listening. Silence. The sound subsided, and the girl decided to open her eyes. Leela saw that the darkness around her had become more transparent. The trees and the alley she was standing on became more distinguishable. Leela saw the flashlight, picked it up, and tried to turn it on. But the flashlight, when it hit the ground, opened a compartment with batteries, and they flew out, and she couldn't find them in the dark. Leaning lower, Leela strolled her hand over the ground, trying to find the batteries. But she could only find the stones and roots. Leela felt the same cold and vibrations again. The girl flinched and ran. There were terrible groans behind her, and Leela saw red and yellow lights flying among the branches, and the humming and mooing were coming closer. Leela's feet didn't feel the ground. She was running, but suddenly something hit Leela's leg, and she fell into a hole. The ankle was burning. There were terrible voices behind her, louder and louder. Leela tried to get out of the pit, grasping at the grass and roots, and the terrible sounds grew louder and louder. And then Leela grabbed something sticky and cold. The girl tried to pull her arm back, but was held tight. Something damp, cold, and sticky was sucking between her fingers. Leela closed her eyes and screamed, imagining a black shadow gnawing at her hand. All of a sudden, the terrible sounds and the deaf mooing subsided again. Leela saw flashes of light through her closed eyes, and she heard Zoe's voice. Leela opened her eyes and saw her friend standing over her and flashing a phone flashlight in her face. "Why don't you answer? I called you 3 times. Why are you sitting in this puddle, and what happened to your hands? Why are they so filthy?" These questions made Leela laugh and want to cry. And she suddenly remembered how on Halloween Eve, she and Zoe had set up terrible tunes on each other's ringtones. Zoe was worried about Leela and decided to call her friend. And in the dark park, Leela was scared of a ringing mobile phone, fell into a puddle, and got dirty in something smelly. Zoe looked at a dirty Leela with wonder and confusion, and Leela laughed, either out of joy or out of stress.